evening and welcome to Talk To. I'm your host, Amos Carty Jr. Thank you so much for joining us. And this evening we're going to be talking about a very important topic. And we first discussed this, I believe, probably two, maybe 3 years ago. And there have been a lot of developments since our last discussion. And we thought it very important that we renew the discussion so that we can, the community can get a sense as to where we are, what's happening, and once again, to get a good sense as to how important this issue is for the Virgin Islands, and certainly even not just for the Virgin Islands, but for the Greater Caribbean and for the world. And this, we're discussing the movement as it relates to Danish reparations. And we're very pleased to have with us this evening our guest, Mr. Shelley Moorhead, who is the president of ACRRA, as we have come to refer to it. President Moorhead, welcome back to Talk To.
Thank you, Amos, and thank you for having me.
It's been too long.
Yes.
It's been too long, and like I said, a lot has happened since you were last here, and we wanted to, first of all, you bring us up to speed with respect to the discussions that have been occurring in Denmark. I know there have been a delegation from the territory that has went to Denmark and had discussions there, and members of our legislature, yourself, and other officials. In addition to which, we recently had a visit from a high-ranking official from Denmark, and so a lot's happening. So we want to start, like I said, at a little far back and then bring us up to speed.
Well, again, Amos, thank you so much for having me.
Sure.
I would be remiss if I did not first give all honor, praise, thanks, and glory to the God of our forefathers for giving us the fortitude, the intelligence, the sensitivity necessary in this day and age to pursue the restoration of this humanity that has been impaired here in the Virgin Islands by more than 175 years of slavery and crimes against humanity. And when I think back to the last time that we were here in our discussion, I remember that it actually preceded the visit to Denmark. And so when you speak about the delegation and the officials that journeyed, and personally looking back for me, that was so very long ago, because we don't measure time by minutes or seconds or hours or days or weeks. But in the Virgin Islands reparations movement, time for us is measured by the progress of initiatives and moving from event to event and project to project and meeting to meeting. And so when we look at September 2004 and then the reparations roundtable in November 2004, and then in April 2005, the delegation to Denmark. I'm just going to go over briefly and try to bullet point perhaps.
Please.
May 4th, 2005, a very historic piece of legislation passes unanimously here in the 26th legislature of the Virgin Islands. It was sponsored by the now Senate President, Usi Richards, and the now majority leader, Celestino White. That resolution condemns the institution of slavery and seeks reparations from Denmark and makes that the official position, so to speak, of the body. The legislation also went on to request recommendations of reparations models that might be implemented and applied not only by ACRRA, but by the Danish Institute for Human Rights, the international organization of which Mr. Morten Kerem is the executive director of. And we're so sorry at this moment that he is not here with us.
Sure.
We know that we were expecting his arrival and it has been delayed. But nonetheless, that was May 4th, 2005. And see, that legislation kind of frames it lays the foundation here in the territory, so to speak, for why we are now welcoming this individual. The support that was expressed by the Senate, by our legislature for ACRRA and for the pursuit of this repair is historical. Its endorsement of the Danish Institute for Human Rights and its partnership with the people of the Virgin Islands towards pursuing these initiatives is also historic. But let me go back a little bit, because I kind of glazed over the Denmark trip. And you see, while there, we drafted collectively the senators, Senator Nelson, Senator Richards, Donna Christensen, myself, and others who were in attendance. We drafted in cooperation with members of the Danish Institute for Human Rights and other members of the Danish community who now fall under the Danish Institute for Human Rights as it relates to our collective task force. We drafted this document and entered into a memorandum of understanding, which became the first of its kind between organizations in Europe and in the Caribbean, or between Danes and Virgin Islanders specifically, that directly acknowledged that the institution of European slavery was responsible for the emotional, psychological, economic, cultural, etc., harm to the people, to the descendants of African people. And so, having signed that document and established this task force that we now jointly participate in, you've got to know that nowhere else in the world has anything like that been done. We receive calls and emails on a daily basis from all around the world, inquiring and seeking counsel as to how is it that in such a relatively short time we have not only thrust the Virgin Islands discussion to the forefront of the international reparations movement, but as a organization or representing the people in this regard, we are now at the head of it. They haven't met at the White House. The bill in the Congress in the United States, every year they may add a signature or two. 40 acres and a mule is still an issue. 3/5 of a man in the United States. Affirmative action, these are all things that are kind of spin-offs of the discussion on reparations. But why we have advanced so far, you see, we as Virgin Islanders and me representing ACRRA, I can't solely take credit for that. And I highlight those things only to show the importance, Amos, of where we are now as a people. But you see, having joined with Denmark and partnered with Denmark for our repair has been the key that has placed us where we are. Forefront, not just leading a movement, but forefront for the repair of our people.
So it has been critical that we have forged this partnership with Denmark to place us in the position that we're in, essentially.
Well, you see, if there was a slave, Amos, then there was a slaver. If there was a colonizer, then there was somebody that was colonized. And when you consider 250 years of colonization and 175 years of concurrent slavery here in the Danish West Indies, and when you look at all that has happened as a result of that, you take a people from their land, their language, their culture, their traditions, their religion, their God. You remove them from their families, their institutions of higher learning. You take away their historical identity and place it somewhere where it is almost impossible to retrieve. They are transported across the Atlantic Ocean and then sold into chattel slavery and bound to the brutality of harsh plantation labor for the remainder of their lives with no accompanying wages.